The dog he saved led him to a family out of time. It all began when a wealthy historian discovered a homeless war veteran risking his own life to save an injured stray dog trapped beneath the twisted wreckage of an abandoned railway bridge. But what happened after that rescue defied logic, rewrote history, and reunited a family that had somehow become lost, out of time. On the edge of a forgotten town in Vermont, where autumn leaves blanketed the streets in shades of amber and crimson, 43-year-old Daniel Brooks woke every morning beneath the cracked wooden roof of an abandoned ranger station. The building had no electricity. No running water. Only a rusted wood stove that barely worked and a sleeping bag donated by a church volunteer 2 winters earlier. Every sunrise followed the same routine. Daniel folded his blanket with military precision. He cleaned the tiny room, despite having almost nothing inside it. He shaved using cold water collected from a nearby creek because, as he often whispered to himself, a man can lose everything except his dignity. Few people knew Daniel had once been one of the Army's finest search and rescue specialists. He had spent years locating missing hikers, pulling families from disaster zones, and training rescue dogs that saved countless lives. But after returning from his final deployment overseas, everything slowly unraveled. Nightmares stole his sleep. Panic attacks stole his confidence. Medical bills emptied his savings. Then came the divorce. Then unemployment. Eventually, there was nowhere left to go. Yet even after losing his home, Daniel refused to surrender the compassion that defined him. Every afternoon he volunteered quietly at a small animal shelter in exchange for leftover food. He repaired broken kennels. Bandaged injured paws. Comforted frightened animals that everyone else considered hopeless. The shelter owner, Mrs. Evelyn Hart, often smiled whenever she watched him. "You know," she once said while handing him a bowl of soup, "dogs don't care what happened yesterday. They only care who loves them today." Daniel smiled. "Maybe that's why I understand them better than people." The words carried no bitterness. Only quiet sadness. Each evening, before returning to the abandoned station, Daniel always walked along the old railway trail. The path had long been forgotten. Trees had swallowed most of the tracks. Nature had reclaimed the land. It was peaceful. The silence helped calm the storms inside his mind. That particular evening, dark clouds rolled across the sky. Wind howled through the forest. Most people hurried home before the rain arrived. Daniel almost did the same. Then, he heard it. A desperate bark. Weak. Panicked. Somewhere beneath the broken railway bridge. Without hesitation, Daniel climbed over rusted beams and unstable rocks. The barking grew louder. Then he saw it. A golden retriever. Young. Its front leg trapped beneath a massive steel support that had collapsed years ago. Rain began pouring. The bridge groaned with every gust of wind. One wrong movement could bring the entire structure crashing down. The frightened dog growled at first, terrified and exhausted. Daniel slowly knelt several feet away. His voice became soft. Steady. "It's all right, buddy. I'm not leaving you." The dog stopped growling. Its frightened eyes locked onto his. Daniel searched the wreckage like the rescue specialist he once was. He studied every beam. Every angle. Every loose stone. He found an old branch long enough to use as a lever. His muscles strained. The rusted steel shifted just enough. "Come on. You can do this." The dog whimpered. Then pulled free. But before Daniel could celebrate, a deafening crack echoed above them. Part of the bridge collapsed. Daniel threw himself over the dog. Broken timber crashed inches from his back. Mud and dust filled the air. When everything became still, the dog licked Daniel's face. Alive. Safe. Daniel laughed for the first time in weeks. "You stubborn little guy. I guess we're both survivors." Neither of them noticed the luxury black SUV parked quietly at the top of the trail. nor the distinguished gray-haired man standing beside it. Professor William Harrington, one of America's most respected historians. He had witnessed everything. From the first desperate bark to the moment a homeless stranger risked his own life to save an animal everyone else had abandoned. And something about what happened next would change both of their lives forever. Before we continue with this incredible journey, I spent countless hours researching and crafting this story to bring you something truly meaningful. If stories like this touch your heart and you want to see more acts of kindness that restore faith in humanity, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It means the world to me and helps these important stories reach others who need to hear them. Now, let's see what happens next. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. The rain had eased into a gentle drizzle by the time Daniel finally stood. His jacket was torn across one shoulder. A thin cut stretched along his forehead, and mud covered nearly every inch of his clothes. The golden retriever stayed close, pressing against his leg as though it had already decided where it belonged. Daniel chuckled softly. "Looks like you've adopted me." The dog wagged its tail for the first time. As Daniel started toward the trail, he noticed the black SUV waiting at the top of the hill. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat stepped forward, holding a large umbrella. His silver hair was neatly combed despite the storm, and polished leather shoes contrasted sharply with the muddy ground beneath them. Daniel instinctively slowed. People driving vehicles like that rarely stopped to talk to someone who looked like him. The stranger spoke first. "You saved that dog's life." Daniel looked down modestly. "I just did what anyone should do." The man smiled faintly. "No. They wouldn't." He extended his hand. "My name is William Harrington." Daniel hesitated before shaking it. "Daniel Brooks." William noticed the firm handshake. Military. Disciplined. Not what he'd expected. "I've spent my life studying history," William said. "One thing I've learned is that true character reveals itself when no one is watching." Daniel glanced toward the bridge. "I didn't know anyone was." William looked at the dog. "Neither did you." For several moments, neither man spoke. The dog wandered between them, tail wagging, blissfully unaware that it had just introduced two strangers from entirely different worlds. William crouched beside the retriever. The dog immediately licked his hand. "So that's where you've been." Daniel frowned. "You know him?" William nodded. "This is Winston. My grandson's dog." Daniel looked surprised. "Your grandson must be worried sick." William's smile faded. "He is. He's been searching for Winston since yesterday morning." Daniel gently scratched behind the dog's ears. "You picked a brave little explorer." William laughed. And apparently, he found an even braver rescuer. As they walked toward the SUV together, William couldn't help observing Daniel more closely. His clothes were worn. His boots were patched several times. But everything was clean. Every movement was calm and deliberate. There was dignity in the way he carried himself. The kind money couldn't buy. William opened the back door of the SUV. Inside lay an expensive blanket. Without thinking, Daniel dried Winston carefully before placing him inside. Only afterward did he realize he had left muddy footprints on the polished doorframe. "I'm sorry. I'll clean that." William shook his head. "Don't. Those footprints remind me of something important." Daniel looked confused. "What?" "That kindness often arrives wearing muddy boots." Daniel smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. As William closed the door, he noticed Daniel trying to quietly slip away. "Mr. Brooks." Daniel stopped. "I appreciate your thanks," he said, "but I'll be all right." William tilted his head. "I wasn't going to offer charity." Daniel looked back cautiously. "I was going to offer dinner." Daniel hesitated. Years of disappointment had taught him that generosity often came with conditions. People sometimes invited him somewhere simply to feel good about themselves. Others expected endless gratitude in return. He had learned to protect what little pride he still possessed. William seemed to read his thoughts. You saved someone my family loves. The least I can do is buy the man a meal. Daniel looked down. I don't like accepting handouts. William answered gently. Good. I don't like giving them. This isn't payment. It's gratitude. For the first time in a long while, Daniel believed someone meant exactly what they said. A few minutes later, they sat inside a quiet roadside diner. Warm light spilled across wooden tables. The smell of fresh bread and roasted chicken filled the room. Several customers glanced toward Daniel before returning to their conversations. A young waitress approached. What can I get you, gentlemen? Daniel immediately looked at the prices. Old habits. He quietly ordered the cheapest soup on the menu. William noticed. He smiled at the waitress. We'll have 2 roast dinners. And please bring your homemade apple pie afterward. Daniel opened his mouth to object. William gently raised a hand. I've spent 40 years lecturing college students. I know exactly when someone is about to argue. Daniel laughed despite himself. Fair enough. As the meals arrived, Daniel ate slowly, savoring every bite without rushing. William watched respectfully. There was no greed. No desperation. Only quiet appreciation. After several minutes, William asked, You worked with dogs before, didn't you? Daniel looked surprised. How could you tell? The way Winston trusted you. And the way you examined that bridge. Daniel set down his fork. I trained military search and rescue dogs. For 12 years. William's eyes widened. 12? Daniel nodded. They taught me more than I ever taught them. What did they teach you? Daniel smiled at Winston, now sleeping peacefully beside the booth. They never judge you by your worst day. The words lingered between them. William leaned back thoughtfully. You know, my grandson could use someone like you. Daniel looked puzzled. He's 10 years old. He lost his father 2 years ago. Since then, he barely speaks to anyone. Winston was the only thing that made him smile. Daniel listened quietly. William continued. He adores history. Especially stories about courage. I think he'd like hearing yours. Daniel's expression darkened. I don't have many stories worth telling. William looked directly into his eyes. I think you're wrong. At that very moment, Winston suddenly lifted his head. His ears perked sharply. Then, without warning, he barked once. Not excitedly. Not playfully. It was different. Focused. Intentional. The dog jumped down from the booth and stood facing the diner's old bulletin board near the entrance. His eyes remained fixed on a faded newspaper clipping pinned beneath dozens of advertisements. Daniel walked over curiously. The clipping was yellow with age. Its headline read, Local family vanishes without a trace during 1986 mountain expedition. Beneath it was a photograph of a smiling young couple holding a little girl. Daniel felt an inexplicable chill. Beside him, Winston let out another low whine. William joined him, staring at the same article. His face suddenly lost all color. Barely above a whisper, he said, That family. I've been searching for the truth about what happened to them for nearly 40 years. Daniel turned slowly toward him. What if? William swallowed hard. What if Winston didn't just lead me to you? What if he led us to them? For a long moment, neither man spoke. The old newspaper clipping seemed strangely out of place among advertisements for yard sales and plumbing services. Its edges had curled with age, and the ink had faded until the faces were barely recognizable. Yet Winston refused to take his eyes off it. The golden retriever let out another quiet whine before gently pawing the bottom corner of the bulletin board. Daniel knelt beside him. "What is it, buddy?" The dog sniffed insistently, then looked toward the window overlooking the distant mountains. William stared at the clipping. "I've seen this photograph hundreds of times." Daniel looked at him. "You knew them?" William nodded slowly. "The man in that picture was Thomas Whitmore. He was my closest friend." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "You never mentioned him." William sighed. "Because talking about him always felt like reopening a wound that never healed." He carefully removed the clipping from the board after asking the diner owner for permission. "I was 29 when Thomas, his wife Eleanor, and their 6-year-old daughter Amelia disappeared. They were hiking through Raven's Ridge after Thomas claimed he'd found evidence of an abandoned settlement no one had documented before. They never came back." Daniel studied the photograph. "There wasn't a rescue?" "There was. The largest search this county had ever seen." William's voice grew heavy. "Helicopters. Tracking dogs. Hundreds of volunteers. They found nothing. No campsite. No bodies. No equipment. It was as if the mountain had swallowed them whole." Daniel understood that kind of silence. He had spent years searching for people who never came home. Sometimes the absence of answers hurt families more than grief itself. William folded the clipping carefully. "I spent decades researching every record, every journal, every map Thomas ever owned. I promised myself I would solve the mystery. And I failed." Daniel rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You never stopped trying." William smiled sadly. "Neither did history." The following morning, William invited Daniel to his family estate. It wasn't simply a mansion. It resembled a museum. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Ancient maps. Leather-bound journals. Artifacts collected from every continent. Portraits of explorers lined the grand hallway. Daniel had never seen anything like it. As they entered the library, a young boy sat curled in a large armchair with a book balanced on his knees. He looked up cautiously. His eyes immediately widened. "Winston!" The dog sprinted across the room. The boy threw his arms around him, laughing so hard that tears filled his eyes. "You came back. I thought I'd lost you forever." William smiled warmly. "Oliver. I'd like you to meet the man who brought Winston home." The boy stood quietly before Daniel. "You saved him?" Daniel nodded. "He saved himself. I just helped." Oliver looked puzzled. "My dad used to say heroes always say things like that." Daniel's smile faded for just a second. "Your dad sounds like he was a wise man." "He was." Oliver's voice became softer. "I miss him every day." Daniel knew exactly what that kind of loss sounded like. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just constant. Winston nudged Oliver's hand, reminding everyone that love sometimes required no words at all. Over the next several weeks, Daniel became a regular visitor. He never expected it. Neither did William. It simply happened. He helped repair broken fences around the property. He trained Winston with advanced search and rescue commands. He even taught Oliver how to read animal behavior. "Never force trust," Daniel explained one afternoon as Winston waited patiently for Oliver's signal. "You earn it. Just like people." Oliver repeated the command. Winston obeyed instantly. "I did it." Daniel laughed. "No. We did." Little by little, the quiet boy began smiling more often. The servants noticed. William noticed. Even Daniel noticed changes within himself. For the first time in years, someone expected him to return tomorrow. But not everyone welcomed Daniel's presence. One evening, during a family dinner, William's younger brother Charles arrived unexpectedly. Charles Harrington had spent his entire life protecting the family's wealth and reputation. He greeted everyone politely. Until he noticed Daniel. And who exactly is this? William answered calmly. My friend. Charles looked Daniel up and down. The homeless veteran? The room fell silent. Daniel lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. William's voice became firm. You're not intruding. Charles ignored him. You've known this man for what? A few weeks? And now he's wandering freely through our family home? Daniel stood. I should leave. Oliver grabbed Daniel's sleeve. No. Please stay. Charles folded his arms. You don't even know who he really is. Daniel answered quietly. You're right. You don't. Without another word, he walked toward the door. Winston followed him immediately. So did Oliver. Daniel. The boy's voice cracked. When are you coming back? Daniel forced a smile. When Winston needs another lesson. Oliver knew it wasn't really an answer. That night, Daniel returned to the abandoned ranger station. The familiar silence felt heavier than usual. Maybe Charles was right. Maybe people from different worlds weren't meant to cross paths. He packed the few belongings he owned into an old backpack. Perhaps it was time to leave town before he complicated their lives any further. Then headlights appeared outside. A car door closed. Moments later, someone knocked gently. Daniel opened the door. William stood there alone. I owe you an apology. You don't. I do. For allowing anyone to make you feel unwelcome. Daniel shook his head. Your brother was protecting his family. William looked directly at him. And you've been protecting mine since the day you met Winston. He reached into his coat pocket. I'd like you to see something. It was Thomas Whitmore's original expedition journal. Its worn leather cover had been carefully restored. William opened to the final completed page. There, sketched in remarkable detail, was an old stone arch hidden deep within Raven's Ridge. Beneath the drawing, Thomas had written one haunting sentence. Some families are not lost, they are simply waiting where time no longer moves. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? William's expression was grave. I don't know. But tomorrow. I think we're finally going to find out. Outside, Winston suddenly stood alert, ears raised toward the dark silhouette of Raven's Ridge. Then he barked once. As if he already knew the way. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the towering pines as Daniel, William, Oliver, and Winston began climbing the narrow trail leading into Raven's Ridge. A cool mist clung to the mountainside. Every step deeper into the forest seemed to hush the outside world. Birdsong faded. The wind became strangely still. Even Oliver noticed. It's so quiet. Daniel nodded. Forests usually have a rhythm. This one feels like it's holding its breath. William tightened his grip on Thomas Whitmore's journal. According to the faded map, they were only a mile from the place where Thomas had made his final sketch 40 years earlier. Or so history believed. Winston suddenly sprinted ahead. Easy, boy. Daniel called. But the retriever didn't stop. He zigzagged through thick undergrowth before disappearing behind a wall of ivy-covered boulders. The group hurried after him. When they pushed through the vines, they froze. There, hidden from the world, stood an enormous stone archway. Exactly like the one in Thomas's journal. Ancient carvings covered its surface. Symbols unlike anything William had ever studied. His hands trembled as he whispered. It exists. It was real all along. Daniel noticed something unusual. The plants surrounding the arch looked untouched. Not dead. Not alive. Simply, unchanged. Leaves showed no signs of decay. Flowers remained in perfect bloom despite the changing seasons. The air itself felt different. Almost weightless. Oliver stepped closer. It feels warm. Daniel gently held him back. We don't know what we're dealing with. Then Winston walked calmly through the arch. Nothing happened. He simply vanished from sight. "Winston!" Oliver cried. Without hesitation, Daniel followed. The others rushed after him. For a brief instant, the world dissolved into brilliant white light. The sensation lasted only seconds. When Daniel opened his eyes, the forest looked different. The sunlight seemed brighter. The air smelled fresher. Nearby, smoke curled from the chimney of a small wooden cabin. Daniel slowly turned toward William. "You said no one had lived here for decades." William stared in disbelief. "There shouldn't be." Before he could finish, the cabin door opened. A little girl stepped outside. She wore a blue dress that looked oddly old-fashioned. Her long brown hair swayed gently in the breeze. She smiled at Winston as though she had known him forever. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He recognized her face immediately. It was the same little girl from the faded newspaper clipping. Amelia Whitmore. Except she was still 6 years old. Exactly as she had appeared 40 years ago. The cabin door opened again. A man emerged carrying a basket of firewood. He looked no older than 35. William's knees nearly gave way. "Thomas." The man smiled warmly. "William. I wondered when you'd finally find us." Tears streamed down William's face. He stumbled forward before embracing his friend. "I searched for you. For 40 years. Thomas looked confused. "What do you mean? We've only been here 2 days." Silence settled over the clearing. Daniel felt chills race down his spine. Thomas glanced toward the mountains. "The storm trapped us. We found this valley. We've been trying to figure out how to get back." William slowly removed his watch. He showed Thomas the date. Thomas laughed. "That's impossible. It says." His smile disappeared. He checked the old pocket watch hanging from his vest. Its hands had stopped. Frozen. At exactly 4:17. The same time recorded in the final page of his journal. Eleanor stepped outside the cabin carrying fresh bread. When she saw William crying, she dropped the basket. "William?" She looked exactly as she had in the old photograph. Not a single gray hair. Not a single wrinkle. Daniel watched as realization slowly spread across every face. Somehow, the family had stepped into a place where time itself had stood still. William could barely speak. "Your daughter. She's older than I am now." Thomas stared at Amelia. Then back at William. His voice shook. "What happened to the world?" Daniel gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "The world kept moving. You didn't. Returning wouldn't be easy." Crossing back through the arch caused a strange resistance, almost as though time itself refused to let go. But Daniel remembered every survival lesson he had ever learned. Stay together. No one lets go of anyone. Holding hands, they stepped through the glowing arch. A brilliant flash engulfed them. Then, they were back in the present. The forest looked older again. The air felt colder. Amelia blinked in confusion. Thomas looked toward the distant valley below. What happened to the town? William smiled through tears. It grew. And it waited. News of the impossible discovery spread quickly. Scientists couldn't explain it. Historians couldn't prove it. But one thing couldn't be denied. Thomas, Eleanor, and Amelia were real. DNA confirmed they were the same family reported missing 4 decades earlier. The story captured hearts around the world. Yet Daniel never sought attention. When reporters asked who deserved the credit, he simply pointed toward Winston. "I only followed a good dog." Within weeks, veterans organizations, local businesses, and members of the community joined together. Not because Daniel had asked. Because they wanted to. The abandoned ranger station became a memory. Daniel was offered a permanent position leading a regional search and rescue program, training rescue dogs and mentoring struggling veterans who, like him, were searching for a reason to keep going. He accepted. Not because it gave him a career. Because it gave others hope. Oliver became one of his first students. Every Saturday morning, the boy and Winston trained beside Daniel. The quiet child who had once struggled to smile now laughed so often that the sound echoed across the training fields. As for Thomas and his family, adjusting to a world 40 years ahead wasn't easy. They had missed birthdays, funerals, entire generations. But they hadn't lost each other. And that, William reminded them often, was a miracle greater than time itself. 1 year later, Daniel stood outside the very same animal shelter where he had once worked for meals. A frightened stray puppy cowered beneath a bench. Before Daniel could move, Amelia, now slowly growing into the future she had never expected, knelt beside the trembling animal. "It's okay," she whispered gently. "You're safe now." Daniel smiled. Years ago, someone had saved a dog. That dog had saved a man. That man had saved a family. And now, that family was already passing kindness to someone else. As the little puppy licked Amelia's hand, Daniel glanced toward Winston, who wagged his tail proudly, almost as if he had known from the very beginning exactly where this journey would lead. This story shows how one act of kindness can change everything. What's one way you could make a difference in someone's life today? Challenge yourself and share your commitment in the comments. A year turned into 3. Then 5. And if you asked anyone in the little Vermont town what had changed the most, they probably wouldn't start by talking about the impossible story that made national headlines. They would tell you about the people. Because miracles may capture attention. But kindness is what changes lives. Daniel Brooks was no longer the man sleeping in an abandoned ranger station. The Regional Search and Rescue Center had become one of the most respected programs in New England, and Daniel served as its director of canine training. Veterans from across the country came to learn from him, not only how to train rescue dogs, but how to rebuild their own lives. Every new class began the same way. Daniel would stand before a room full of men and women carrying invisible scars. Some walked with canes. Others avoided eye contact. Many believed they had been forgotten. He would smile and say, "You're not here because you're broken. You're here because someone still believes in what you can become. And if you can't believe that yet, I'll believe it until you do." Those words became the heart of the program. One by one, lives changed. Veterans found purpose again. Families were reunited. Rescue teams across the country adopted Daniel's methods, saving countless missing children, hikers, and disaster victims. Meanwhile, Winston had become something of a local legend. Children recognized him everywhere. He visited schools, hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers. People often joked that Winston seemed to know exactly who needed comfort before anyone else did. Daniel never argued. He had seen enough to know that some things didn't need explaining. They simply needed appreciating. William Harrington also found something he never expected. Peace. For 40 years, he had lived with unanswered questions. He had buried friends without saying goodbye. Carried guilt that never truly belonged to him. Now, every Sunday afternoon, he sat on the porch beside Thomas Whitmore, drinking coffee while watching Amelia and Oliver chase Winston through the yard. Sometimes they talked about history. Sometimes they talked about nothing at all. One afternoon, Thomas looked toward the mountains. "I used to wonder why we were chosen." William smiled. "And now?" Thomas watched the children laughing together. "I don't think we were chosen because we were special. I think we were chosen because someone else would need our story." William nodded slowly. Perhaps every miracle is really an invitation. An invitation? To become kinder than we were yesterday. For Thomas, Eleanor, and Amelia, adjusting to modern life remained a daily adventure. Amelia had never seen a smartphone. She couldn't understand automatic doors. The internet fascinated her. She once laughed uncontrollably after asking a voice assistant what the weather would be and hearing it answer. But beneath those amusing moments was something deeply emotional. Every sunrise felt like a gift. Every birthday mattered. Every ordinary day became extraordinary because they understood what it meant to lose time. Eleanor started volunteering at the local food pantry. Thomas began restoring historic buildings using traditional craftsmanship that had nearly disappeared. Their knowledge, once considered outdated, became invaluable. They discovered that although the world had changed, goodness never had. Oliver changed perhaps more than anyone. The quiet little boy who once struggled to smile grew into a confident young man with a dream. He wanted to become a search and rescue handler. Not because it sounded exciting. Because he had witnessed what compassion looked like. On his 18th birthday, Daniel handed him a worn leather leash. "I've kept this for years." Oliver recognized it instantly. It had belonged to Winston. The old retriever, now gray around the muzzle, rested peacefully beside them. Oliver knelt, wrapping his arms around his lifelong friend. "I don't know if I can ever repay everything you've done." Daniel smiled. "You don't repay kindness. You pass it on." Years later, Oliver did exactly that. Leading his own rescue team, he became known for never giving up on missing people everyone else believed were beyond saving. Whenever reporters asked where his determination came from, he always answered with the same sentence. "A homeless man once showed me that every life is worth searching for." As for Daniel, he never became wealthy. He never wanted to. The greatest treasure he found wasn't hidden behind the mysterious stone arch. It wasn't fame. It wasn't recognition. It was family. Every Thanksgiving, the Harringtons and the Whitmores gathered around one impossibly long table. There was laughter. Friendly arguments over recipes. Children running through the yard with dogs close behind. And every year, without fail, William raised his glass before dinner. To Winston. Everyone smiled. Then Daniel would gently interrupt. "No. To kindness. Because without it, none of us would be sitting here." The room always fell quiet. Not from sadness. From gratitude. Sometimes the smallest decision, a moment when no one is watching, when helping seems inconvenient, when walking away would be easier, becomes the turning point in countless lives. Daniel never knew that rescuing one frightened dog would lead him to friends who became family. William never imagined stopping his car on a rainy afternoon would heal a wound he'd carried for 40 years. Oliver never expected a stranger to become the mentor who shaped his future. And Winston? Well, perhaps Winston knew all along. Because sometimes the ones we believe we're rescuing are the very ones sent to rescue us. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us. If this touched your heart, please like this video. It helps more people discover these inspiring stories. Subscribe for more tales of human kindness that will restore your faith in humanity. And most importantly, look for opportunities in your own life to be someone's unexpected blessing. Hold the door for a stranger. Visit someone who feels forgotten. Feed a hungry animal. Offer encouragement to someone carrying burdens you cannot see. You never know which small act will echo across generations. What act of kindness will you perform this week? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, you have the power to change someone's entire world. Sometimes all it takes is choosing not to walk away.